Star Wars New Jedi Order Agents of Chaos 2 Jedi Eclipse followed James Lucino's very personal tale of death and mourning to bring a tale about moving on and reconnecting with yourself. I know, a lot of heavy topics for a couple of novels about guys with laser swords running around. Agents of Chaos 2 takes place in 25 ABY, picking up right after Agents of Chaos with Han and Droma still looking for Roa and Droma's family. Leia, meanwhile, is dealing with the mounting refugee crisis across the Outer Rim following the various Yuuzhan Vong attacks, while also worrying about her husband who continues to distance himself from her and their family, becoming more and more like the old rogue he was before meeting with the Rebel Alliance back in the day. Mara is starting to feel better after using the strange Yuuzhan Vong regenerating formula of Vergier's tears from the last book. She's not that important here, but that's important, so there you go. Meanwhile, Jedi Worth Skitter, one of the Jedi who is off with Kip's little faction of Jedi that think an active offensive would be more useful against the Vong than the defense route the Jedi adopt largely through the war, heads off to be captured by the Vong, hoping to mount a strike and avenge his fallen friend Miko Reglia, a Jedi killed in the Vector Prime novel. Anyways, this plan goes awry naturally, but he is held with Roa, who basically tells him this is all pretty fucked up. Anyways, the Hutts are tentatively allying themselves with the Yuuzhan Vong, knowing the value of the Outer Rim territory to the Vong offensive against the New Republic as they try to find a way to stay out of it and continue spice and crime businesses. Han and Droma end up off on Ruan, which is taking in mass refugees to use as slaves. Han learns that they are also somewhat working with the Yuuzhan Vong, sacrificing their droids to appease them, pissing off the droid population, which agree to help Han within their programming restraints to help free these refugees that are being used as slaves. Republic sources, including Talon Card, who is able to get with the Hutts a bit, learn that the Yuuzhan Vong's next offensive will either take place at Corellia or Bothawai, but don't know which. As a result, Anakin and Jason are sent to Centerpoint Station to activate the thing, sort of think the Death Star but made by Corellia, after it was deactivated. This is when Fondor is attacked rather than Corellia or Bothawai. With little chance of a strong defense, Anakin is tasked with shooting center point at the Vong fleet. He refuses, but his uncle or second cousin, Han's cousin, Thakian, is here and he shoots it, destroying the Vong fleet and being declared a hero. Han Solo and Droma were at the Battle of Fondor chasing leads to find Droma's family, and they do along with Roa. Finally, we learn about the rising senator in the New Republic, Vicky Shesh, a double agent working with the Yuuzhan Vong, but that's all more relevant later. This book has more storylines than the previous book, starting with our lead, Han Solo, who is back with his new co-pilot friend Droma, and the duo are still looking to rescue Han's old friend Roa and Droma's family. Han is still working through grief, though the Vong War is on the move again and is heating up. Droma is trying to size up Han's mental situation and help him live with his grief as Han tries keeping them alive. Han is keeping his distance from Luke, Leia, Mara, and his kids, and is fighting more like a scoundrel every day as he did before the war with the Empire. Though all this regression is a necessary evil to kind of put him back on track mentally, which we start seeing through the novel and continuing into further volumes of the New Jedi Order series. Han is facing a new challenge as he ends up on Roan. Well, he looks for Roa and Droma's family, and it seems some shady systems are kind of using the Vong War to their benefit, the planet turning its out-of-planet refugees into slave labor, and Han trying to put a stop to all that. At the end of the novel, Han leads a droid uprising, something reflected in the canon novel Solo Most Wanted. He leads a droid uprising there too. One of the droids, Baffle, even reminding him of Bollux, his old droid companion from the Brian Daley Solo novels. I like that Han is the most compassionate criminal. That is how he went on to the straight and narrow in the first place. But here, he goes as far as to help droids, which a lot of people in the Star Wars galaxy don't. They're definitely considered second-class citizens, and I like that compassion Han has for all life, and I guess droid existence. Droma is Han's new companion, and they are in this thing together. Droma missing his family, Han his friend. Droma is Han's shoulder to cry on, but also has a lot of compassion for the smuggler, and while he isn't half the co-pilot Chewie was from a skill perspective, Han didn't really need a co-pilot as much as he needed someone to help keep him sane in this difficult time. I really like Droma, and he is different from Chewie in every way, but I think he would have made an amazing new co-pilot if they went that route. However, in a bittersweet twist, Droma's family is found, so he leaves Han and the duo part on good terms as new friends. Leia is on her galactic diplomacy mission looking for new recruits to the New Republic. This leads her to the Hapes Cluster, a group of small planets that once hoped to make Leia their queen by marriage, which leads to her having some awkward connections to the royal family, though eventually they do join Leia in her fight against the Yuuzhan Vong. This is all really weird for Leia since she is meeting her ex-suitor, all while trying to convince the planet he rules to join her. Eventually she succeeds and their army heads off to Fondor, though tragically much of their forces are destroyed in the crossfire as Centerpoint Station over Corellia is launched off, destroying much of their force and causing some issues with the Hapes people moving forward within the series. However, this did delay the Vong taking over Fondor for a time. She still worries about her husband and kids and thinks Han is falling too deep into the revenge pipeline against the Yuuzhan Vong, which she fears will lead to his demise. The Hutt cartel and their politics are another moving part, and as you'd imagine, they're kind of slipping around doing whatever will gain them favor in the war. The Hutts always kind of played by their own rules, so whoever wins, it doesn't really matter so long as they can continue to make money on the shadier side of the galaxy. Part of them think the Yuuzhan Vong may be a good ally, but as it starts proving even harder to operate under the Zealot Vong, they eventually lean more on the side of the New Republic. The Hutt's politics are pretty interesting, but in a macro sense aren't too important to the grand story. It's just kind of peek into what's happening from that angle. Talon Card shows up a bit here, trying to rein in the smugglers, but doesn't prove overly important. What he does do early on is keep an ear to the Hutts, knowing that they're on some decent terms with the Vong at first. He tracks their pattern in the days leading up to the battle, watching how the spice trade moves to see if there are interruptions, and leading the New Republic to info that either the Bothawai or Corellia systems were targets before the Vong ended up doing their third target, Fondor, since the Vong knew a threat to those major high-power systems had caused the New Republic to lock in bureaucracy over how they should use their resources, which was ultimately the Yuuzhan Vong's biggest advantage at this point, was just how disorganized the New Republic tend to be with the different political views within the Senate. Thraken Solo is Han's cousin, and is basically a corrupt asshole on Corellia. He was set to reactivate Centerpoint Station, but needed Anakin Solo to activate it since it was he, as a child, who destroyed Centerpoint. It's weird, but his goal is to peer pressure his nephew into using the weapon on the Vong fleet, something Anakin considers as his pacifist brother Jason tells him it's a bad idea and not the Jedi way. Eventually, Anakin listens to reason and chooses not to destroy Centerpoint, but since he has activated the weapon, Thraken is able to use it, killing a ton of Vong, but also killing thousands of Hape soldiers and ships in the crossfire, something by and large he is hailed a hero for among the wider New Republic, despite the collateral damage. Anakin was distraught because that was an unnecessary risk that ended up killing people on their side, and he was a part of it, but Jason comforts him for ultimately stepping back and even telling Thraken they shouldn't use it, which Jason sees as enough to kind of remove him from culpability. Worth Skitter is a Jedi Knight under Kip's dozen Avengers squad that more or less distances themselves from the wider Jedi Order. He is captured by the Vong, though during that drama Kip and Ganner show up to rescue him, though it's too late. Skitter hanging on for dear life, basically at death's door, after the absurd torture he has gone through, sacrificing himself to allow Kip and the other hostages of the Vong, including Roa, who happen to be captive with him, escape. This informs Kip's arc, as it is another big failure on his part, which starts seeing him switch more and more into the direction of reunification with Luke Skywalker and the wider Jedi Order, which as time goes on has some interesting twists and turns and compromises, but we're getting a bit ahead of ourselves here. Vicky Shesh is back, still working both sides, building to her arc, which we will need to mention in every book for a while. She's a huge missed opportunity in this series. I absolutely despise her character. We'll come back to her, but she's starting to move on her plans a bit here. At this point, we learn her ambition is to basically own Coruscant after she helps the Vong win the war, figuring she could gain influence in their ranks, wanting to be rich and powerful, and frankly not caring really who gives her the power, whether it's the New Republic or the Vong. Kind of a Palpatine type. This book has Leia talking to refugees, and one says pretty much the line verbatim, "To me, you're always royalty," which is a close variation on what Lord Santeca would eventually say in The Force Awakens when talking about Leia.
To me, she's royalty.
Unlike the first novel, which takes this series' complex, tangled story and makes it a Han Solo novel about a meditation on grief, this book largely goes back to business, with a little bit of Han moving on and becoming himself again as kind of the side story. The first book was the one I think Lucino wanted to make personally, and this is the book he made to kind of move the story forward, and as a result, he added a ton of stuff with Jedi, space politics, and more perspectives than simply just Han Solo's POV as he pines over Chewbacca's death. I almost wonder if it was outlined as one novel but then split, since Han's story continues from the first more or less, but we move back a bit into the wider story. I don't know exactly. It's still pretty good. I like seeing all of the Solos except poor Jaina have a lot of things going on. Leia is begging her ex-boyfriend for help, kinda Aki. Han is grieving, and Jason and Anakin have to test their philosophy on Jedi code and figure out how far is too far with the Yuuzhan Vong, who take everything too far. Anakin's arc especially being a beautiful lead into his Edge of Victory duology arc, which is coming up pretty quick here, and would inform Anakin's story as we inch towards his final chapter in Star by Star. There are lots of questions answered here, and it is a good ending to Han's story set up in the first novel, as well as a jumping on point right back into the many fronts of the Yuuzhan Vong War. Anyhow, if you liked this and want to see my videos on the first 4 books in the New Jedi Order saga, I have them in my Star Wars playlist along with many other Star Wars videos, which will be linked on the end screen right here.